Rick, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good, Keith. How come we're dressed up?
Is it your birthday?
No, I was thinking the hoodie. I was supposed to wear a hoodie, and I wore a blazer. This is the hoodie for an older fella.
Okay, great. Okay, great.
And-
I have a few of those too. Does that mean I'm older?
Well, I have a hoodie too, but people make fun of me when I wear it.
Why?
Well, it's just out of the age. I'm out of the. It's the wrong demographic for a hoodie.
I don't think that's it. I think people love seeing that hair. Your hair is beautiful, man. You have a great head of hair. You do know that, right?
It's a wig, right? You know, it just kind of goes like that. I
No, but
just
seriously,
wash
you
it.
do. You
Well,
know that?
You know, it's genetic. And my mom had white hair when she was like 25, and so did my dad.
Really?
Yeah,
That
is
young?
that crazy? Yeah.
Oh man, it's great. Did you, when the hair became white, did you like
Color it?
Yes. Did you color it?
Yeah, I did for a while.
Okay.
Yeah, until I started doing the practice. I realized I didn't need to do it to be authentic.
Okay. Beautiful. There's still some other things that you probably still do though, right? Or to
You mean
mask.
vanity stuff?
Yes, vanity
Oh,
stuff.
sure, yeah. Dressing. I mean, I try. I sure wouldn't want to be naked anymore.
Oh God.
So, do you ever see a longhorn, a longhorn cow, a steer?
Yes, I've seen one.
Yeah, those are amazing animals. They should be naked.
They should be
No,
naked.
not people.
Not people.
Most of us, anyway. You're the exception.
Oh, it's too funny. Man, oh God. Oh man. Thank you for the laughs, man. We always have a good time, don't we?
It's a wonderful thing to have fun with another person. I mean, in a non-malicious way where you're not.
Exactly.
Nobody gets hurt.
Exactly, man. And how long we been friends, Rick? It's been what, 12 years
06,
now?
You know, 13.
13 years, man. Beautiful friendship, man.
Yeah, it's been great.
Just-
And we've both gone through a lot of changes and seen developments and setbacks and all the rest.
Yeah,
It's just
you
life.
know, exactly. And we've been there for each other every step of the way.
Absolutely.
You know, for some of those setbacks and challenges. Now we see all of them, they all represented openings, you know?
Yep. Some are bigger than others, and
Yeah.
I'd like to not have as many openings.
We're trying to minimize those now, right? These days with the practice.
That's exactly right.
Exactly. So today's show is inspired by a friend of ours who is in a high stakes career. And when I say high stakes, that when the outcome doesn't go a certain way, there is potentially some suffering and pain for those who are left. And so this show's title is How Do You Reconcile Undesirable Outcomes for Things That You Feel That You're Responsible for? So for example, your children, you know, going down a path that you don't think is healthy or aligned with what you would want for them, whether it's not finishing school or marrying somebody that you don't think is a good fit for them.
Experimenting with drugs and alcohol.
Exactly, those things. A career, it could be that you lose a patient if you are a healthcare provider or professional. As an attorney, you lose a big case and people may have to be incarcerated or things like that. So how do you reconcile undesirable outcomes with things that you feel you are responsible for? You want to take a shot at this first?
Sure. I guess one thing that comes to mind right away is to first begin with the notion that it takes a pretty big ego to think that you're responsible for the outcome. Now think about that for a minute. It takes a pretty big ego to think that you are the one who determined the result that you don't like. So maybe what we need to do is to take a look at what the outcome is and not focus on what our responsibility for it was, but to focus more on the idea that you worked as hard as you possibly could as a parent, as a doctor, as a lawyer, as a real estate agent, as an accountant, as an engineer, as a soldier, and the outcome wasn't the way you wanted it, not because of your effort, but because of circumstance.
Absolutely.
Now, that's not a comfortable feeling because we're always, I think, hard on ourselves if we're responsible people. We tend to take over responsibility. We tend to be overly responsible for things that are beyond our control. Much of life is mystery. Much of life is what the doctors call idiopathic. You can't explain what the origin of something might be, and you can't always account for every circumstance. All you can do is focus on your own effort, and when your own effort, you believe, has been maximized, then you have to detach and let some other entity or some other circumstance, the universe, decide what the outcome might be. Now, within your own effort, there's a lot of things that can be controlled and a lot of things that can be looked at. When I lose a case, and I've lost many, I've lost cases I should have won, I've won cases I should have lost, but the reality is that if there is nothing that you could change about it, it has to be relegated to the past. Even if there are things that could be changed about your performance that affected the outcome. All you can do is create a list of things that you could have done better and then do those things better and include them in part of your professional practice and then let it go. I'm a big believer in getting a lesson and then letting go, but you can't continue to feel guilt and obligation for something that was not going to be able to be redone. You know, it's a funny thing in life about how we look at our past mistakes. It's almost as if humans think that if they worry enough about the past or they beat themselves up about it, that there would be an opportunity to do an instant replay and you could doctor the tape and have a different outcome. And since you can't do that, there's absolutely no point in going back over and over and over. Once you isolate what the mistakes were that you made, if you made any, and you learn from those, and that's all you can do. It's still going to be uncomfortable, but you got to let it go. Because if you don't let it go, I guarantee you it will affect your performance in the future negatively. As a parent, that's a perfect example. If you keep making that same mistake that you're the one responsible and the kid isn't, there's going to be a day of reckoning that you're not going to like.
Yeah, I totally agree, Rick. From the practical side of things, of the things that are within your control, are you setting yourself up to perform at the highest level that you can without being obsessive about thinking about it, ruminating about it, and things like that? Are you doing the practical things? And those go beyond book learning, the diligent practice of the skill set that's required for you to be good at your craft, but they also include self-care, beginning first and foremost with training the mind to step out of the way so that consciousness can flow through and you can come from a loving place, and that informs how you do your craft. So I think that's number one. Once you do that, you come to number two, which is the practical way of approaching it. And this is something the mind loves, because the mind loves steps and it loves cues on what you can do. But reframe it from everything from win or lose to win and learn. And I got this from a guy named Lanny Basham, who was an Olympic athlete, and he trained other Olympic athletes. And they were conditioned by society, by judges, by the people that they competed against, competed with, that if you don't win, you've lost. They went on to believe that there's no such thing as, it's only first place. Everything else, you've lost. And that way of thinking robs you of what you can learn from the experience. And so he's a big believer in win and learn. And as Rick said, once you apply those things of what you may have done, what you could have done differently, or what you can do better, then you start to do it, But the biggest thing is to the arrogance to think that you have control over outcome, beyond the practical things that you can do. And when you think that you're setting yourself up for a lot of suffering in the future, as much as we want, children to be on a certain path, live life a certain kind of way, that's really out of your control. You do the best job as you can, trying to be a conscious parent, and impart those values and be a really good example for them. And then outside of that, that's up to them,
That's great.
Yeah.
Great. We're talking about ego. Another way I think that ego causes us pain needlessly, and the idea that we are responsible for outcome that we've just discussed. When you do your best and then you let it go and critique your performance, learn, as Keith said, about the mistakes that you made. That's the way that you can deal with it. I found that the biggest mistakes that I've made as a practicing lawyer usually are around my ego, where I've been arrogant about taking it too lightly maybe, that I've done it so many times, or I've had good results in this particular kind of a case. I've made mistakes because of my own ego and my own arrogance about it. And that brings us to the idea of something I think is really important no matter what walk of life you're in, and that's the notion that there's a bigger payoff personally for all of us if we have a beginner's mind about things, thinking of it as being something to learn, something new in this procedure that I haven't done before.
Right.
And I want to take it from the beginning. I want to have a beginner's kind of fault-filled experience. I want to try this in a way that is going to be just as if I was doing it for the first time.
Right.
Whereas if you take it from the expert's point of view, it's more like arrogance. It's sometimes half-assed. You're just phoning it in. I mean, I'm overstating it. But the idea is there's a difference between a beginner and an expert. And even though you're an expert, I think the proper mindset is to believe that you're beginning as a beginner and be humble about it. I start now that I'm older and I've learned this the hard way and I've been doing the practice. I start with every case or every situation saying, after I've completed all of my preparation, and maybe the night before or the morning of the trial, I just say, I just want to have the most powerful and the most honest and authentic approach I can take in this case, and I'm going to turn this over to forces that be to help me channel the right thing to do, and then trust. That's another thing about the beginner's mind. There's a trust component that's involved that I think that experts poo-poo, because they're the ones who know. There's no trust. There's no gray area. It's all expertise and nothing more. And I think that's wrong.
Yeah, I mean, if it was so right, then how do you explain the quote-unquote undesirable outcomes or the failures?
There wouldn't be any failures if experts did what they were supposed to. No, there's still going to be failure. No
Exactly.
matter what.
I like the idea of the beginner's mind and to approach life that way. And it's something that I really started to apply maybe about 4 years ago. Whereas before, there had to be some kind of novelty about whatever it was that I was doing. There had to be some newness to it. And I thought that the only way there could be newness to it, it had to be my first encounter with it. Very first time ever being with this experience with this person. And let's say it's a conversation with someone, and I've had the conversation 1,000 times, a conversation with this person 1,000 times, then you almost kind of half hear them, instead of it's the first time that you're listening to them and they're sharing something valuable with you.
That's a great point, Keith.
And so I have worked on that. And so instead of just novelty having to do the job with no participation on my part, I look at it a little bit differently now. I come in, and if somebody has a new pair of sneakers on, I'm like, those new shoes? Your hair is done. I like the eyebrows. Nice job. I've trained myself to be rooted in the present moment. And for, let's say, a doctor, and they're doing some kind of surgery, and it's a surgery they've done 10,000 times, to bring that beginner's mind to it, I think it'd be great to have to become present again as if it's the first time.
That's right.
And that comes from your sense perceptions. So the first time that someone put a scalpel in your doctor's hand, you didn't know how to hold it, how to handle it. How do you hold it? How do you handle it? What does it feel like in your hand? Is it cold? How does the steel feel? Like, what does it feel like? How do I hold it when I'm making an incision and I'm making a cut? When I'm walking on stage for the first time, how do I feel, in these shoes? How my arches, as I move and walk across the stage, what do they feel like? Am I standing tall? What is my posture like? As I survey the room and I'm taking in all the people that have given me the gift of their time, am I honoring them with being present and making eye contact with them and just noticing what colors they're wearing and just those things of just rooting myself in that moment, I think helps me be the beginner with something that I've probably done 1,000 times. And when I show up that way, it increases the chances of me being my best, of me doing my best. I still have no control of the outcome, how the audience will receive whatever it is that I'm trying to contribute, or what will happen with the patient, what will happen, what the verdict will be, or the final decision. I got no control over that, but I've done my part. And that's the part that I'm responsible for. Anything outside of me that's external, I have no control over that. And you can accept it or not accept it. It's what's so.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Keith. Well said. I think that gets to the point of pretty much what we talk to almost every session, which is the difference between external knowing and internal knowing. People who are looking for outside authority or approval or strokes are very different people than those who self-replenish, who are able to nourish themselves by knowing themselves and knowing that they're not their egos and they're doing things because they have a sense of mission or a sense of purpose, which usually involves helping other people. One of the things about beginner's mind I think that's very important and very helpful for people is I notice in myself when I feel more humble about things, if I'm in a state of grace where there's a feeling of humility, I think I can be much more powerful.
Yes.
Much more powerful than if I'm trying to show off or if I'm trying to, indicate to other people that I'm really confident. You don't need to do that. If you just let it, if you just be humble and get into your power. You've studied it, you know it, you're ready to go. Let that talk and not the show-off part of it.
Exactly.
But I suffer from that too. I mean, believe me, that's a big deal. Egos for people in any kind of profession that you've done for a while is big. And you become myopic. You think that you've seen it all and you know all the answers, and it's so wrong. If you could just be humble and look at it fresh as a brand new problem, just like you did, as you say, when you held the scalpel for the first time.
Exactly.
It'd be a better result, probably.
Yeah. What would you say to parents and with their children and things like that?
Boy, that is so hard because letting anything go about a person that you love, where you're not trying to continue to help and continue to provide support and money and so forth. All I can say is there's no difference with that and a career issue. You cannot, as you said, you cannot affect outcome all the time, and you can't affect it probably most of the time. All you can do is do your part. You can educate, you can nourish, you can nurture, you can do things that are within your power, but at the end of the day, when you're dealing with another person, that person is on their own path. No matter how much you love them, no matter how bad you see where they're headed, you can only do so much. And the problem is the pushback that you get from somebody else because you're pushing and they just don't like the pushing, even if they know you're right.
Right.
That's where you don't want to be, because then you become part of the problem. It's causing them to go in the very direction that you don't want them to go.
Exactly. And as a parent, there are things that, maybe you can answer this, there's things that you can do to be your best. So are you setting yourself up with a practice that allows you to show up in your support and your leadership with that person, with that child? Are you showing up in a calm way? Or are you a broken record, nagging, finding fault, scanning what you can do to improve them? But are you leading gently by example? Are you getting your sleep? So when you show up for them, you're peaceful, you're kind. Are you fit, to where if it's long days and nights, that fatigue won't make you short with them? Are you eating in a way that helps you be of optimal health so that you can rear them and guide them in the right way? I mean, there's so many things that you can do to show up as your best as a parent to give them a great resource to, if not listen to to model when they're ready.
And part of the self-care, though, is also having boundaries.
Yes.
So that you're not affected by the child's opinion of what you're doing. You know, a lot of parents I see want to be friends with their children. You know, they don't like the idea of being a disciplinarian, but that's part of the job. Maybe a part that doesn't come natural to you, or maybe it becomes very natural, and that's pretty much what you're doing the most of. But the idea is that when you get pushback from the child, there has to be a boundary that you realize is something that can't let you stop doing what you think is in the best interest of the child, and it can't get to the point where you need to self-defend, you know, so it becomes about you instead of his behavior or her behavior or omission that he or she hasn't done that you want them to do. I think that self-care is huge, and the idea is, again, it's that path. You know, you are a parent, but you're also a human being, and you have your own needs, your own obligations, and your own sense of self-worth that has to be tied up with something internal, and you have to be able to resource that.
Yeah, and I think you know, this will be for another show. I think that ties into, in this moment when it comes to this child, parenting is a role that you just happen to be playing in that moment or in that snapshot in time. But at your core, you are a being having a human experience, and your consciousness is flowing through you, and you want to get to the point to where you can be that conduit for it to do so. But oftentimes when you're playing a role, like I've got to be the best doctor, I've got to be the best attorney, I've got to be the best speaker, I've got to be the best parent, you become so identified with it that it almost becomes the obstacle.
And that's getting back to the beginner's mind. I don't think that anybody should worry about mistakes. I think people should, if you go in with the idea of the greatest good for all concerned, if you start with that and you truly believe it in your heart, greatest good for all concerned, let the best result happen and do your best to bring that about. Most everything will be taken care of.
I completely agree, man.
But also that also means that if the person is being a complete jerk on the other side of it, that's not to be tolerated. The best result in that situation could be a cutting off of the communication, or some kind of penalty or punishment, or something that would allow that person to grow and allow you to protect and grow as well.
I completely agree. Well, Rick, do you want to say anything about how you're going into, you have a legal thing coming up here that will serve as an example, that you won't have any, you won't have any control of the outcome. So let's end with how you're going to prepare for that.
Yeah, well, I've already prepared, and I'm pretty much prepared. I have a few more things to do that are technical things, lists, and making sure that I know the evidentiary rules about some of the things that I'm trying to get into evidence. So there's some technical things I have to do yet. I don't like to formulate my arguments ahead of time. I mean, my words that make the argument. I have bullets of what points I want to make, but the words I don't want to rehearse. I want those to be natural. The main thing that I have to control is the idea that I've done it before and that the case is really huge and I can't afford not to make any mistakes. The idea is that you forge ahead, you do your best, you put it all out that you can put out, and then once you say your last word and you sit down, you let it go, and it's beyond my ability to help. And then if the outcome is terrible, the outcome is terrible. I'll review and decide what I did wrong, if I did anything wrong, and I'm sure I will have. And I'll try to be better the next time. But apart from that, I don't think there's anything more you can do.
It's not, man.
I don't think so. Yeah. I think, you know, before we hang up here, I think one of the things that we deal with as men is the sports stuff.
Yeah.
You know, because if you ever watch ESPN, you know, those poor guys, they play one game on Sunday. You know, one guy might have 3 bad plays, and that's all you see on the replay.
Yeah.
Over and over and over and over. It's like the guy drops the pass 100 times. Truth was, he dropped it once. And, you know, some guy was fighting him for it. He weighed 200 pounds and fell on him, and he couldn't grab the damn thing. So, I mean, it was just one human foible, but it's blown up so large that poor guy, I don't know how in the world, you know, he could live with himself. But that's what we do to ourselves. We have an instant replay for all of our mistakes. And I guess I'm taking the position in this podcast, get rid of the instant replay. do it once, figure out what you did wrong, if anything, and you probably did.
Learn from it.
Learn from it, as Keith said, and then you let it go. Let it go. Big. Let it go is big. It doesn't serve you to hang on to it. Learn and let it go.
Perfect. Rick, I love you, man.
I love you, buddy.
Thank you.
Adios.